The quickest way to destroy a woman is to make her believe she was never chosen. The chandelier lights of the Grand Crescent Hotel shimmered like gold across the marble ballroom, warm and soft, the kind of glow that made wealthy people look untouchable. Crystal glasses clinked gently beneath the low hum of expensive conversations, while a jazz piano drifted through the air like smoke. Every table was covered in white roses flown in from California that morning, each centerpiece worth more than Claire Bennett's monthly rent. She adjusted the cuff of her black catering uniform and lowered her eyes before anyone could notice the tiny tear near her sleeve. Table 12 needs champagne. The event manager snapped as servers rushed around her carrying silver trays. Claire nodded quickly. Got it. Her feet already ached from standing for nearly 10 hours, but tonight mattered. The extra pay from this charity gala would cover part of her mother's heart medication. Maybe even enough groceries for the week if she skipped eating lunch tomorrow. Across the ballroom, cameras flashed near the grand staircase as New York's elite arrived one by one wrapped in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Claire tried not to stare. People like them belonged to another universe. A universe where nobody worried about overdue electric bills or choosing between medicine and groceries. Claire. The sharp voice made her freeze instantly. Vanessa Bennett stepped toward her in a silver satin dress that probably cost more than Claire's car. Her blonde hair fell in flawless waves over one shoulder, diamonds sparkling against her neck. Standing beside her, Claire suddenly felt invisible again. Try not to embarrass me tonight, Vanessa said quietly, her smile still perfect for the nearby photographers. This event matters to important people. Claire swallowed. I'm just working. Vanessa glanced at the catering uniform with obvious disgust. Exactly. Keep it that way. Before Claire could answer, Vanessa leaned closer. And stay away from Ethan Calloway if you see him. Claire frowned slightly. Why would I? Because men like him don't notice girls carrying appetizer trays. Vanessa smoothed. Imaginary wrinkles from Claire's sleeve. Your staff, Claire. Don't forget that. Then she walked away toward the photographers, instantly transforming back into New York's favorite socialite, with a bright, polished laugh that made everyone around her smile. Claire looked down at her tray. Somehow Vanessa still knew exactly how to make her feel 12 years old again. Invisible. Temporary. Replaceable. The ballroom doors opened again. A subtle shift moved through the crowd immediately, like the entire room inhaled at once. Claire looked up before she could stop herself. Ethan Calloway entered beside two board members from Calloway Group, his dark tuxedo perfectly fitted, broad shoulders cutting through the sea of guests with effortless confidence. He wasn't smiling, yet every person in the room seemed desperate for his attention anyway. Claire had seen his face before on magazine covers and grocery store checkout lines. Billionaire hotel owner. America's youngest hospitality CEO. Ruthless in business. Untouchable in public. But standing 30 feet away from him felt strangely different from seeing him in photographs. Real. Human. Dangerous in the quietest way. Move, Claire. Another server whispered urgently behind her. She quickly grabbed a tray of champagne flutes and stepped toward the center aisle, just as a laughing guest backed into her path. Time seemed to snap apart all at once. The tray tilted. Crystal glasses slid. A splash of cold champagne spilled directly across the front of Ethan Calloway's tuxedo. The ballroom went silent. Claire's stomach dropped instantly. Oh my God. I'm so sorry, she breathed, horrified. One shattered glass rolled across the marble floor. Every nearby conversation stopped. Cameras slowly turned toward them. Claire reached for a napkin with trembling fingers, but before she could speak again, Vanessa appeared beside her like a storm. Claire. Her voice cracked sharply across the ballroom. What is wrong with you? Claire froze. It was an accident. Vanessa suddenly slapped the napkin from Claire's hands hard enough for it to fall onto the floor beside the broken glass. You ruin everything you touch. The words hit harder. Then the silence around them. Claire felt dozens of eyes locking onto her at once. Heat climbed painfully into her face. She bent quickly to pick up the broken glass pieces before someone got hurt, but her hands were shaking too badly. Stop. The deep voice cut cleanly through the tension. Ethan Calloway stepped forward. Not toward Vanessa. Toward Claire. He crouched beside her before she could react, and picked up the fallen napkin himself. The entire ballroom stared openly now. Claire looked up in shock as he gently handed the napkin back to her. Don't apologize, he said quietly. His voice was calm, steady, unexpectedly warm. It wasn't your fault. Vanessa's smile disappeared completely. Claire could barely breathe. Ethan glanced down briefly while helping her stand, and for the smallest moment his fingers brushed the silver star charm hanging from the chain around her neck. Something unreadable flickered across his expression. Recognition. Confusion. Then his eyes lifted back to hers. And for the first time all night, Claire felt like someone had actually seen her. Claire did not realize she had been holding her breath until the elevator doors finally closed behind her. The noise of the ballroom disappeared instantly, replaced by the soft mechanical hum of the service elevator carrying her down toward the basement level. Her hands still trembled around the empty silver tray. She stared at her reflection in the brushed steel wall and saw exactly what Vanessa always saw. Cheap uniform, tired eyes, a girl who never belonged in rooms filled with crystal chandeliers and billionaires. But tonight something felt different. Ethan Calloway had looked directly at her, as if the rest of the ballroom did not exist. And somehow that unsettled her more than Vanessa's humiliation ever could. Claire. She jumped slightly as her co-worker Mia squeezed into the elevator before the doors closed completely. Are you okay? Claire forced a quick nod. I am fine. Mia gave her a look that clearly said she did not believe it. Vanessa was way out of line. Claire lowered her eyes. She is my sister. That does not mean she gets to treat you like that. Claire gave a small tired smile but said nothing. Because this was not new. It had been this way her entire life. Vanessa shining in the center of every room, while Claire learned to stay quiet near the walls. When they were kids, Vanessa got piano lessons and beauty pageants while Claire stayed home helping their mother fold laundry at the kitchen table. Vanessa always had expensive birthdays. Claire had hand-me-down sweaters and apologies. The elevator opened into the staff hallway, bright fluorescent lights replacing the warm gold glow upstairs. Claire stepped out quietly and headed toward the locker room. She had almost reached the door when someone behind her spoke. Miss Bennett. She stopped instantly. That voice again. Low, calm, controlled. Claire turned slowly and nearly forgot how to breathe. Ethan Calloway stood alone in the hallway without the crowd, without cameras, somehow looking even more intimidating now. Up close, she could see the faint crease near his jaw like he had not slept properly in days. You forgot this, he said softly, holding something in his hand. Claire looked down and froze. Her silver star charm necklace. The chain must have snapped during the accident upstairs. She quickly reached for it. Thank you. But Ethan did not let go immediately. His eyes lingered on the tiny engraved star resting against his palm. Where did you get this? Claire blinked, surprised by the question. It was my father's. Something unreadable moved across Ethan's expression again. Your father gave it to you? Before he died. The hallway suddenly felt too quiet. Claire gently pulled the necklace back into her hand. It is not worth much, she said awkwardly. But it is important to me. Ethan looked at her for another second longer than necessary. Sometimes the things worth the most do not look expensive. Her heart stumbled unexpectedly at the way he said it. Before Claire could answer, footsteps echoed sharply down the hallway. Vanessa. Of course. She stopped the second she saw them standing together. Ethan, she said smoothly, instantly slipping back into her polished public voice. Everyone is looking for you upstairs. Ethan barely glanced at her. I was returning. Something. Vanessa's eyes dropped immediately to the necklace in Claire's hand. Her expression tightened for half a second before the smile returned. Claire should probably get back to work. The words sounded sweet. The meaning underneath did not. Ethan finally looked back at Claire. Good night, Miss Bennett. Then he walked past Vanessa without another word. Claire stood frozen until he disappeared around the corner. Vanessa's smile vanished instantly. What exactly was that? Claire frowned. Nothing. Do not lie to me. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think one little accident suddenly puts you in his world. Claire folded her arms tightly. I never asked for his attention. Then stop encouraging it. Claire stared at her sister in disbelief. Encouraging what? He handed me my necklace back. Vanessa laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. You really do not understand how men like Ethan work. And you do? That landed harder than Claire expected. Vanessa's face hardened immediately. At least I know how to survive around powerful people. Claire shook her head slowly. No, you know how to perform around them. For one brief second, hurt flashed across Vanessa's eyes before pride covered it again. You have always been jealous of me. Claire almost laughed from exhaustion. Jealous. Her voice cracked softly. Vanessa, you spent our whole childhood making sure there was never enough room for both of us. Silence settled heavily between them. Then Vanessa leaned closer. Listen carefully. Ethan Calloway is not some lonely guy walking into a coffee shop. Men like him destroy girls like you without even noticing. Claire swallowed but refused to look away. You sound worried. Vanessa's jaw tightened instantly. I am trying to save you from embarrassing yourself again. She turned sharply and walked back toward the ballroom, heels clicking against the tile floor like tiny warning shots disappearing into the distance. Claire remained alone in the hallway, clutching the broken necklace in her hand. Slowly, she looked down at the small silver star resting in her palm. The edges were worn smooth from years of carrying it everywhere. Her father used to call it her lucky star when she was little, the one thing nobody could ever take away from her. Yet tonight, for the first time in years, Claire could not stop thinking about the look on Ethan Calloway's face when he saw it. For the next 3 days, Claire convinced herself she would never see Ethan Calloway again. Men like him lived inside glass towers and private jets, while women like her carried folding chairs and cleaned candle wax off ballroom tables at 2 in the morning. Their worlds had touched for less than 5 minutes. That should have been the end of it. But on Thursday afternoon, Claire's phone rang while she stood on a ladder arranging white hydrangeas inside a small wedding venue in Brooklyn. Claire Bennett speaking. Miss Bennett, this is Olivia from Calloway Group Events. Claire nearly dropped the flowers. I am sorry, from where? Calloway Group Events. Mr. Calloway reviewed your floral work from the charity gala and requested you personally for a private project next week. Claire blinked in confusion. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Miss Bennett. We are hosting an investor dinner at the Crescent Rooftop Ballroom. Mr. Calloway specifically asked for you. Her stomach tightened instantly. Me? Yes. Would you be available? Claire looked around the tiny venue with peeling paint and flickering lights. She had spent the entire morning worrying about her mother's medication refill and whether the landlord would give them another extension on rent. Turning down work was not an option. Yes, she answered softly. I am available. The call ended, but Claire remained frozen on the ladder long after the screen went dark. Who was that? Her co-worker Denise asked while unpacking roses nearby. Claire hesitated. Calloway Group. Denise's jaw dropped. The Billionaire hotel people? Claire nodded slowly. Denise stared at her in disbelief. Claire Bennett, what exactly happened at that gala? Claire forced a nervous laugh. Nothing. But deep down, she knew that was no longer true. 2 nights later, Claire stood once again inside the Grand Crescent Hotel. Only this time, she was not wearing a catering uniform. She wore simple black slacks, a cream sweater, and her hair tied back loosely while she arranged white orchids across the rooftop ballroom overlooking Manhattan. The city lights glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows like stars scattered across dark water. Everything around her looked impossibly expensive. Even the silence felt rich. You changed the entire layout. Claire nearly jumped at the sound of Ethan's voice behind her. She turned quickly. Ethan Calloway stood near the entrance without his suit jacket, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, watching her with quiet interest. Claire lowered the flowers she was holding. I thought the original setup blocked the skyline. Ethan glanced around the room slowly. You were right. She looked down awkwardly. Most people do not pay me to have opinions. Maybe they should. Her cheeks warmed slightly. Ethan stepped closer to the center table, studying the floral arrangement carefully. White orchids. They last longer under rooftop lighting, Claire explained softly, and they reflect candlelight better after sunset. Ethan looked at her instead of the flowers. You notice details most people miss. Something about the way he said it made her heart beat unevenly. Claire quickly adjusted another centerpiece to avoid looking directly at him. Well, details are usually my job. A faint smile touched his mouth. It transformed his entire face for half a second before disappearing again. Would you like coffee? He asked unexpectedly. Claire blinked. What? You have been working for 4 hours. He checked his watch. And according to the staff downstairs, you skipped dinner. Claire stared at him in shock. You asked the staff about me? Ethan looked almost amused now. You noticed details too, remember? 20 minutes later, Claire sat at a small corner table near the ballroom windows holding the most expensive cup of coffee she had ever tasted, while Ethan Calloway ate cold pizza directly from a cardboard box beside her. The entire situation felt unreal. "You are staring," Ethan said calmly without looking up from his slice. Claire looked away instantly. "Sorry. You expected billionaires to eat caviar?" She laughed before she could stop herself. A real laugh this time. Quiet but genuine. Ethan glanced at her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Manhattan glittered below them while soft jazz drifted through the empty ballroom speakers overhead. It felt strangely peaceful. "So," Ethan said eventually, "how long have you been designing events?" Claire wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "Since I was 19. That young. My dad died when I was 16. After that, somebody had to help pay bills." Ethan's expression shifted subtly. "And your mother?" "Heart condition." Claire gave a small shrug. "Some months are easier than others." Ethan remained quiet for a moment too long. Not pitying. Listening. That somehow felt more dangerous. "You love flowers," he said softly. Claire looked surprised by the statement. "What makes you say that?" "Because every time you touch one, you stop looking tired." Her breath caught slightly. Nobody had ever noticed something like that before. Claire looked down quickly at the silver star necklace resting against her sweater. "My father used to bring home flowers every Friday," she admitted quietly. "Cheap grocery store bouquets. Nothing fancy. But my mother smiled every single time." Ethan watched her carefully. "Sounds like he loved her very much." Claire nodded slowly. "He did." Silence settled gently between them again, warm instead of awkward. Then suddenly, the ballroom doors opened behind them. Claire turned instantly. Vanessa stood there frozen in a white designer coat, staring at the two of them sitting together beside the city skyline. And for the first time since childhood, Claire saw something unfamiliar in her sister's eyes. Not superiority, not annoyance, fear. Vanessa recovered fast. Too fast. By the time she crossed the ballroom toward them, her expression had already transformed back into the polished confidence millions of social media followers adored. But Claire knew her sister well enough to notice the tension hidden beneath the smile. Vanessa never liked surprises she could not control. "I did not realize this was a private dinner," Vanessa said lightly as she approached the table. Ethan stood slowly. "It is not." Vanessa slipped her designer purse onto the chair beside him as if she belonged there naturally. "Good. Because your assistant told me you were still upstairs." Her eyes moved toward the pizza box on the table, then toward Claire holding her coffee cup. Interesting choice for investor preparation. Claire immediately stood. "I should get back to work." "Actually," Ethan said calmly, "the ballroom setup is finished." Claire looked at him, surprised. Ethan glanced around the room once before looking back at her. "You did excellent work." The words were simple, but hearing them in front of Vanessa felt strangely dangerous. Vanessa crossed her arms slowly. Claire has always enjoyed compliments. Claire ignored the comment and reached for her floral notebook. "I will send the final invoice tomorrow." Ethan nodded once. "I would prefer if you handled the upcoming winter gala too." Claire froze instantly. "Another event?" "3 events," Ethan corrected calmly. "If you are interested." Vanessa's smile flickered. "3." Ethan did not look at her. "Your work deserves larger rooms than Brooklyn wedding halls." Claire could barely process what she was hearing. 3 Callaway events would mean enough money to finally pay their overdue rent. Enough to refill her mother's prescriptions without calculating every dollar first. Enough to breathe for the first time in months. But Vanessa stepped closer before Claire could answer. Claire already has too much on her plate. Ethan finally turned toward Vanessa fully. "I believe Miss Bennett can answer for herself." Silence settled sharply between them. Claire looked down immediately, uncomfortable being trapped in the middle of whatever invisible tension had suddenly appeared. "I appreciate the offer," she said softly, "but I should probably check my schedule first." Ethan studied her quietly for a second. Then he nodded once. "Fair enough." Claire quickly gathered her notebook and coat before the atmosphere became any more uncomfortable. "Good night." She turned toward the ballroom doors, but just before leaving, she glanced back instinctively. Ethan was still watching her. Vanessa noticed it too. Claire felt it. Immediately, the air in the room had changed. The next morning, rain covered Manhattan in a gray blur while Claire stood inside a crowded pharmacy waiting for her mother's heart medication. The pharmacist handed her the receipt with an apologetic look. Insurance only covered part of it. Claire stared at the total silently. $248. Her chest tightened instantly. "Can you hold one prescription until next week?" she asked quietly. I can only pay for the essentials today. 20 minutes later, Claire stepped back onto the sidewalk, holding one small paper bag instead of three. Cold rain soaked through her sweater almost immediately, but she barely noticed. She was already calculating which bills could wait another week. Her phone buzzed suddenly inside her pocket. Vanessa. Claire almost ignored it. Almost. What? Where are you? Vanessa's voice sounded unusually sharp. Outside the pharmacy. Good. Stay there. The call ended instantly. Claire frowned in confusion. 10 minutes later, a black luxury SUV pulled against the curb beside her. Vanessa stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a cream trench coat despite the rain. Get in. Claire hesitated. Why? Because standing in the rain looking miserable is attracting attention. Claire climbed inside reluctantly. The warm leather interior smelled expensive and unfamiliar. Vanessa removed her sunglasses slowly once the driver pulled away from the curb. You need to stop seeing Ethan. Claire stared at her. I am not seeing Ethan. Do not play innocent with me. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly now. You think I did not notice the way he looks at you? Claire folded her arms tightly. You are overreacting. Vanessa laughed quietly under her breath. You really have no idea what you are doing. Then explain it to me. Vanessa looked out the rain-covered window for a long moment before answering. Men like Ethan do not fall in love with girls carrying grocery coupons. The words landed cold and sharp between them. Claire looked away instantly toward the blurred city outside. You know, she said softly. Sometimes I think you care more about wealthy people choosing you than about being happy. Vanessa's jaw tightened immediately. And sometimes I think you judge things you could never survive inside. Claire turned back toward her sister slowly. Why does this bother you so much? For one brief second, Vanessa looked almost trapped by the question. Then the walls returned instantly. Because I know how this story ends. Meaning? Vanessa leaned closer. Meaning powerful men enjoy attention from women like you until they get bored. Claire swallowed quietly, but refused to look down. You sound like you were speaking from experience. The car went silent. Vanessa's expression hardened immediately. Stay away from him, Claire. Or what? Vanessa looked directly into her eyes now. Cold. Precise. Or you are going to lose more than your job. Before Claire could answer, the SUV suddenly stopped outside her apartment building. Vanessa opened the door without another word. Claire climbed out slowly into the rain again, confused and unsettled. But as the SUV pulled away, she noticed something strange through the tinted back window. Vanessa was not angry anymore. She looked afraid. Upstairs, Claire unlocked the apartment quietly and stepped inside carrying the pharmacy bag. The scent of tomato soup filled the tiny kitchen while soft jazz played from an old radio near the sink. Her mother looked up from the stove with a tired smile. Long day. Claire nodded faintly while hanging her coat near the door. Then her mother's eyes moved toward the silver necklace resting against Claire's sweater. You fixed your father's star. Claire touched the charm gently without thinking. Not yet. Her mother smiled softly. He used to say that necklace would lead you somewhere important one day. Claire looked down at the worn silver star in silence. Then for some reason, she thought about Ethan Calloway watching her across the ballroom windows while Manhattan glowed behind him like another world waiting just out of reach. By the following week, Claire's life no longer felt stable enough to predict from one morning to the next. Every day brought another Calloway event request, another unexpected message from Ethan's assistant, another moment where she found herself stepping deeper into a world she still did not understand. Yet somehow, the more time she spent around Ethan Calloway, the less intimidating he became. That was the dangerous part. He remembered small things, the kind nobody else noticed. He knew she hated artificial lilies because they reminded her of hospital waiting rooms. He remembered she always drank coffee with too much cream whenever she was stressed. Once, during a 12-hour setup for a rooftop charity dinner, he quietly left a turkey sandwich beside her floral station because he noticed she had skipped lunch again. Nobody had ever paid attention to her that carefully before, especially not someone like him. But the closer Ethan moved toward Claire, the colder Vanessa became. Small things started happening first. Claire arrived at a venue in Manhattan only to discover someone had canceled her delivery order. A luxury client suddenly withdrew from a signed floral contract after receiving anonymous messages questioning Claire's professionalism. Another event manager quietly informed her that rumors were spreading online claiming Claire flirted with wealthy clients to secure jobs. Claire pretended not to care. but every rumor felt personal, precise, designed by someone who knew exactly where her insecurities lived. One Friday evening, Claire stood alone inside the Crescent rooftop ballroom adjusting candle arrangements for another Callaway investor event while thunder rolled softly over Manhattan outside the glass walls. Rain streaked across the skyline in silver lines, turning the city lights blurry and distant. She barely noticed Ethan enter behind her until his voice broke the silence. "You have been avoiding me." Claire kept adjusting the candles. "I have been working." Ethan stepped closer slowly. That was not an answer. Claire finally looked up at him. "You are my client, Ethan." It was the first time she had used his first name aloud. Something subtle shifted in his expression immediately. Softer somehow. Closer. And Claire lowered her eyes again. "And people are talking." Ethan glanced toward the storm outside. "People always talk. Not when it can destroy someone." Silence settled between them. Rain tapped gently against the massive windows surrounding the ballroom, while distant thunder rolled over the city like a warning. Ethan moved toward the skyline slowly, loosening his tie with one hand. "Vanessa came to my office yesterday." Claire froze instantly. "Why?" Ethan looked out across Manhattan for a long moment before answering. "To tell me you were becoming emotionally attached to me." Claire felt heat rise into her face immediately. "That is ridiculous." "I know." He said it calmly. Too calmly. Claire stared at him uncertainly. "Then why are you telling me?" Ethan turned toward her slowly. "Because I want to know if you are afraid of rumors, or afraid of me." The question landed somewhere deep inside her chest. Claire looked away quickly. "You do not understand what this looks like from my side." Ethan stepped closer. "Then explain it to me." Claire laughed softly under her breath, but there was no humor in it. "You walk into rooms, and people move out of your way. You probably have not worried about rent since college." Ethan remained quiet. Claire continued before she lost courage. "You belong in this world." "I do not." Ethan watched her carefully. "Who told you that?" Claire almost answered immediately. "Vanessa." But the word stayed trapped inside her throat. Instead, she shook her head slowly. "Reality told me that." Outside, lightning flashed faintly behind the skyline. Ethan walked toward her until only a few feet separated them now. "Claire." His voice lowered gently. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" Her heartbeat stumbled. "Probably a florist making your investors happy." "No," the word came instantly. "Certain. I see the only person in months who talks to me like I am human instead of useful." Claire looked up before she could stop herself. Ethan's eyes held hers steadily now, calm but intense in a way that made the room suddenly feel smaller. "Most people want something from me," he said quietly. "Status, access, headlines, money." His gaze never left hers. "You never asked me for anything." Claire swallowed softly. "That is because I know none of this belongs to me." Ethan stepped even closer now. "What if I wanted to?" The storm outside seemed to disappear completely for one suspended second. Claire could hear nothing except the soft rhythm of rain against glass and her own pulse pounding too loudly in her chest. She should have stepped away. Every instinct told her to protect herself before this became something painful and impossible. But Ethan looked at her the way people looked at sunrise after surviving a long winter. Like seeing her mattered. "People like me do not survive in your world," she whispered finally. Ethan's expression softened in a way she had never seen before. "Maybe I am tired of my world." Claire felt her breath catch. Then without planning to, without fully understanding how it happened, Ethan reached up slowly and brushed a damp strand of hair away from her face. The gesture was gentle, careful, as if she were something fragile worth protecting. Claire's eyes closed briefly at the warmth of his hand near her cheek. And then Ethan kissed her, softly at first, hesitant enough to give her time to pull away. But Claire did not. The city glowed silver behind them while rain poured against the rooftop windows, and for one impossible moment, none of the distance between their worlds seemed real anymore. Then suddenly Claire heard the sharp sound of a heel against marble behind them. She opened her eyes instantly. Vanessa stood near the ballroom entrance completely still, her face pale beneath the cold white lights. And this time, there was no fear left in her expression at all. Only fury. The silence after Vanessa appeared felt heavier than the storm outside. Claire stepped back immediately, her pulse racing while Ethan slowly lowered his hand from her face. Rain hammered against the glass walls surrounding the ballroom, but inside, nobody moved. Vanessa's eyes locked onto Claire first. Not shocked, not hurt, Furious. I knew it, she said quietly. Her voice sounded calm, which somehow made it worse. Claire opened her mouth instantly. Vanessa, it is not what you think, really? Vanessa laughed softly under her breath. Because from where I am standing, it looks exactly like my sister kissing the man she knew I was seeing. Claire froze. Ethan's expression hardened immediately. Vanessa. No. She held up a hand sharply without looking at him. Do not do that thing where powerful men suddenly decide honesty matters after they get caught. Claire felt sick. You said you and Ethan were friends. Vanessa looked at her in disbelief. Friends. Her laugh cracked this time. Claire, half of Manhattan thinks we are heading toward an engagement announcement. Claire slowly turned toward Ethan. What? Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. That rumor came from investors and gossip sites. Not me. Vanessa stared at him. You never corrected it either. Ethan did not answer immediately. And somehow, that silence hurt Claire more than anything else. Vanessa folded her arms tightly as thunder rolled outside. You know what the funny part is? She said softly to Claire. I actually defended you. Claire blinked in confusion. What? Every time people called you weak. Every time someone said you would never survive in this city. Vanessa shook her head slowly. I defended you because I thought at least you were loyal. Claire swallowed hard. I did not plan this. Vanessa's eyes filled briefly with something dangerously close to emotion before it disappeared again. Nobody ever plans betrayal. Then she turned and walked out of the ballroom without another word. The doors closed sharply behind her. Claire stood frozen beside the candlelit tables while rain blurred the skyline beyond the windows. Ethan stepped closer carefully. Claire. She immediately shook her head. Did you know people thought you were dating Vanessa? Ethan exhaled slowly. Yes. The answer hit harder than she expected. Claire looked away instantly. Why would you let that happen? Because correcting gossip creates headlines. Claire laughed quietly under her breath, but her eyes burned suddenly. Right? Of course. Headlines. Ethan moved closer again. It was never real. Maybe not to you. Claire grabbed her coat from the chair nearby. But clearly it was real enough for my sister. Ethan watched her carefully now. This is not about Vanessa. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Everything is about Vanessa. Her voice cracked softly. Before she could stop it. You do not understand what it is like growing up beside someone the world always chooses first. Ethan remained silent. Claire wrapped her arms around herself tightly. She gets the attention. She gets the opportunities. She gets the life people fight for. Her eyes lowered toward the marble floor. And I get what is left over. Ethan stepped directly in front of her now. Claire, look at me. She did not want to. But she did anyway. Ethan's voice softened. You are not second to anyone. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they terrified her. Because part of her wanted desperately to believe him. And that felt dangerous now. I should go home, she whispered. Ethan reached gently for her wrist before she could walk away. Please do not disappear on me. Claire looked down at his hand against her sleeve. Warm. Careful. Steady. You do not get to ask me that, she said quietly. Not while my sister is crying somewhere because of us. Ethan slowly let go. Claire picked up her bag without another word and left the ballroom beneath the sound of rain and distant thunder. By the time Claire reached her apartment building, the storm had flooded half the sidewalks in Queens. Her shoes were soaked completely through, but she barely noticed. All she could hear was Vanessa's voice repeating inside her head. Nobody ever plans betrayal. Upstairs, the apartment was dark except for the kitchen light glowing softly near the sink. Mom. Claire stepped inside carefully. No answer. Her chest tightened instantly. Then she noticed the note resting on the table beside the medicine bottles. Hospital. Shortness of breath. Do not panic. Claire's heartbeat dropped straight into panic anyway. 40 minutes later, she rushed through the emergency room entrance with rainwater still dripping from her coat sleeves. Nurses moved quickly beneath harsh fluorescent lights while televisions hummed quietly overhead. Claire spotted Vanessa sitting alone near the hallway outside the cardiac wing. Her mascara was smudged slightly. Her designer coat hung loosely around her shoulders now like armor finally cracking apart. Claire slowed immediately. How is she? Vanessa looked up tiredly. Stable. Claire exhaled shakily and sat beside her in silence. For several minutes, neither sister spoke. The only sounds were distant hospital monitors and rolling carts somewhere down the hallway. Then Vanessa finally spoke without looking at her. You really kissed him. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Vanessa, do you know how long I spent trying to build a life where people finally took me seriously? Claire looked at her sister quietly. Vanessa laughed softly under her breath. You think I love fancy parties and rich people because I am shallow. Her voice trembled slightly now. But do you know what it feels like growing up terrified of becoming poor again? Claire frowned slowly. Vanessa stared down at her hands. After Dad left, Mom cried over bills every night for 3 years. Claire said nothing. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. I promised myself nobody would ever look down on me again. For the first time in years, Claire suddenly saw her sister differently. Not just polished and cruel. Scared. Exhausted. Human. Then Vanessa looked at her directly. But Ethan was never supposed to look at you that way. Claire felt her throat tighten instantly. Before she could answer, a nurse appeared beside them holding a small cardboard storage box. Are you Margaret Bennett's daughters? Both sisters stood immediately. Your mother asked for these old belongings from home. The nurse explained gently. She said there is something important inside for you. Confused, Claire accepted the box carefully. The lid shifted slightly as she lifted it. Inside rested faded photographs, old letters, and a familiar silver envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. Claire Bennett, care of Callaway Foundation. Claire stared at the silver envelope like it might disappear if she blinked too hard. The elegant crest stamped into the corner was unmistakable now that she had seen it repeatedly on hotel menus, investor folders, and ballroom screens over the last few weeks. Callaway Foundation. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the envelope from the cardboard box. Vanessa immediately stood beside her. What is that? Claire shook her head. Slowly. I do not know. But something deep in her chest already knew this was connected to the silver star necklace. To Ethan's strange reaction the first time he saw it. To the questions nobody ever answered. The hospital hallway suddenly felt too small. Too bright. Claire carefully opened the envelope while Vanessa watched silently beside her. Inside rested several folded documents and one handwritten letter yellowed slightly with age. Claire unfolded the letter first. Her breath caught instantly at the signature near the bottom. William Callaway, Ethan's father. Claire began reading aloud softly. To Thomas Bennett and his daughter Claire. There are no words large enough to repay what your kindness gave my family. During the worst year of my life, when bankruptcy threatened everything we built, you protected my wife and son without asking for recognition or reward. You gave us shelter when nobody else would. I promised that one day I would return that kindness. If anything ever happens to you, the Callaway Foundation will ensure your daughter is never left alone in this world. Claire's voice faltered. Vanessa looked pale now. Claire unfolded the next document slowly. A scholarship agreement. Fully funded. Tuition assistance. Living expenses. Beneficiary, Claire Bennett. Date issued nearly 10 years earlier. What? Claire looked up slowly at her sister. Why have I never seen this before? Vanessa did not answer. Claire searched deeper inside the box with shaking hands until she found another unopened envelope addressed to her from years ago. And another. And another. Her chest tightened painfully now. Vanessa. Her voice barely sounded like her own anymore. Did you know about these? Silence. Then finally Vanessa whispered. Yes. The word hit harder than any scream could have. Claire stared at her in disbelief. You knew? Vanessa looked away instantly. Mom asked me to pick up the mail after Dad died. Claire felt cold all over. You hid them. Vanessa's eyes filled with emotion she could no longer control completely. At first I thought it was just charity. Claire stepped back slowly. You let me work 3 jobs while there was scholarship money? You think I wanted to become the only poor girl in Manhattan? Vanessa snapped suddenly. Several nurses glanced over from the far end of the hallway before quickly looking away again. Vanessa lowered her voice immediately, but the damage was done. Years of fear and resentment spilled through every word now. Everything changed after Dad died. Mom got sick. Bills kept coming. And suddenly there was this foundation wanting to save you. Claire stared at her sister like she no longer recognized her. So you decided I did not deserve it? Vanessa's expression cracked completely now. I decided I was tired of being scared. Tears filled Claire's eyes instantly. Not loud tears. Quiet ones. The kind that come when heartbreak finally explains itself all at once. Every missed opportunity. Every rejection letter. Every night wondering why life kept choosing other people first. Vanessa swallowed shakily. I thought if you stayed small, then maybe I would not disappear. Claire looked down at the old scholarship papers in silence. Ethan had not been searching for a random girl after all. The Calloway family already knew her name long before she ever walked into that ballroom, carrying champagne trays. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Claire looked up instinctively. Ethan stood near the hospital entrance wearing a dark wool coat, still damp from rain outside. The second his eyes found the papers in Claire's hands, his expression changed completely. Not surprise. Recognition. Claire's voice shook softly. You knew? Ethan approached slowly. My father spent years trying to locate your family after your father passed away. Claire stared at him. Why? Ethan glanced down briefly at the silver star necklace around her neck. When I was 11, my father nearly lost everything. His voice remained calm, but quieter now. More personal. My mother got stranded during a snowstorm outside Albany with me in the car. Your father took us into his home for 2 days while nobody else stopped to help. Claire listened silently. Ethan continued softly. My father said Thomas Bennett was the kindest man he ever met. Claire's eyes filled again instantly at hearing her father described that way. Ethan looked at the papers in her hands. After he died, my father created the scholarship program for you. Claire laughed quietly through tears that no longer made sense. Except I never got any of it. Ethan slowly turned toward Vanessa. The silence between them sharpened instantly. Vanessa folded her arms tightly, like she could still protect herself somehow. I was trying to survive, she whispered defensively. Ethan's voice remained calm. By stealing her future? Vanessa looked away immediately. Claire suddenly felt exhausted beyond words. Not angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of carrying years she never understood. Tired of wondering why life always felt one step harder for her than everyone else. She looked down again at the old letters addressed to her younger self. Opportunities she never even knew existed. Ethan stepped closer carefully. Claire. But she shook her head instantly. Do not. Her voice cracked softly. Please do not look at me like this suddenly explains everything. Ethan remained silent. Claire swallowed hard against the ache rising in her chest. I spent years believing I was simply not enough. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly beside her. Claire looked between both of them slowly. The billionaire who had unknowingly walked back into her life. The sister who spent years hiding it from her. Suddenly the entire room felt unbearably heavy. Then a nurse appeared quietly beside them. Your mother is awake, she said gently. Claire nodded faintly while wiping her eyes quickly. But just before she walked toward the hospital room, she turned back toward Vanessa one last time. You did not just hide money from me. Her voice trembled softly. You hid the version of my life where I mattered too. The next week felt unreal. Like Claire had stepped into someone else's life without permission. Everywhere she looked, there were reminders of the years she had lost. Scholarship documents spread across the kitchen table. Letters from the Calloway Foundation offering internships, mentorship programs, tuition assistance. One unopened envelope even contained acceptance papers to a private design school in Chicago dated 7 years earlier. Claire sat at the tiny kitchen table long after midnight reading every page while rain tapped softly against the apartment windows. Her mother slept quietly in the next room after returning home from the hospital, but Claire could not sleep at all. Some heartbreaks arrive loudly. Others arrive quietly enough to rewrite your entire identity without making a sound. Vanessa had stopped coming home regularly after the hospital confrontation. Sometimes Claire heard her sister moving around the apartment late at night, but they barely spoke now beyond polite questions about medication schedules or groceries. The silence between them felt fragile. Exhausted. One Thursday afternoon, Claire arrived at the Grand Crescent Hotel for what she assumed was another floral consultation. But the ballroom looked different immediately. Massive screens lined the walls. Reporters moved between camera crews beneath bright white lights, while Calloway executives spoke quietly near the stage. Claire frowned in confusion. What is all this? Olivia, Ethan's assistant, approached quickly. Mr. Calloway is making an announcement tonight. Claire adjusted the strap of her bag nervously. Why am I here? Olivia hesitated briefly before answering. Because he asked for you specifically. Claire's stomach tightened instantly. Across the ballroom, Ethan stood near the stage in a dark navy suit speaking with investors beneath the giant Calloway logo suspended above the screens. Even from a distance, she could feel the pressure surrounding him tonight. Money, reputation, power. Entire industries moved when Ethan Calloway entered a room. Suddenly, Claire felt painfully out of place again. Ethan looked up at that exact moment. The second his eyes found her across the ballroom, something in his expression softened immediately. He excused himself from the investors without hesitation and walked directly toward her. Cameras subtly followed the movement. Claire noticed it instantly. "What is happening?" she asked quietly once he reached her. Ethan looked calmer than everyone else in the room somehow. "I need to fix something." Claire folded her arms uneasily. "Ethan, please trust me." Trust. The word felt complicated now. Ethan guided her gently toward the side of the ballroom, near the skyline windows, just as reporters settled into their seats. Flashbulbs lit the room in bursts of white light, while executives whispered nervously near the stage. Then Claire saw Vanessa. Her sister stood near the front row wearing an elegant ivory dress, perfectly styled for cameras as always. But Claire immediately noticed the tension in her posture. Vanessa looked pale, cornered. Ethan stepped onto the stage moments later beneath the glow of giant screens displaying the Callaway logo behind him. The ballroom fell silent instantly. "Thank you all for attending tonight." Ethan began calmly into the microphone. Originally, this evening was intended to announce a new expansion partnership for Callaway Group. He paused briefly. "But there is something more important I need to address first." Reporters immediately lifted cameras higher. Ethan's gaze moved through the ballroom until it found Claire again near the windows. "For several weeks, false narratives involving my personal life have circulated publicly." Vanessa's face tightened instantly in the front row. Ethan continued calmly, "Including assumptions about my relationship with Miss Vanessa Bennett." The room became perfectly still. "To be clear," Ethan said firmly, "Miss Bennett and I were never engaged, never romantically involved, and never building a future together." Gasps rippled quietly through the ballroom. Vanessa looked frozen beneath the lights now. Ethan's voice remained steady. "Unfortunately, rumors were allowed to continue because silence was easier than honesty." Claire felt her chest tighten unexpectedly at the admission. Ethan glanced briefly toward Vanessa before continuing. "But tonight I refuse to let another person carry consequences for confusion. I should have corrected myself." Then the giant screens behind him suddenly changed. Old photographs appeared across the ballroom walls. A younger William Callaway beside a smiling man Claire recognized instantly as her father. Snow-covered cabins, handwritten letters, scholarship records. The entire room murmured in shock. Ethan looked directly toward the audience. "Years ago, Thomas Bennett saved my family during the darkest period of my father's life. The Callaway Foundation created educational opportunities for his daughter Claire Bennett after his death." Claire felt every eye in the ballroom slowly turning toward her now. Her heartbeat pounded painfully. Ethan's voice softened slightly. "But due to circumstances beyond her control, Claire never received the future intended for her." Vanessa closed her eyes briefly in the front row. Cameras shifted instantly toward her. Ethan stepped away from the podium then. Not toward investors. Not toward executives. Toward Claire. The ballroom seemed to disappear around her as he crossed the marble floor beneath hundreds of watching eyes. He stopped directly in front of her beside the skyline windows glowing with New York lights. "Claire Bennett deserves to stand in rooms like this because of her talent," he said quietly enough that only nearby microphones captured it. "Not because of me." Her eyes burned instantly. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and carefully placed a small silver box into her hands. Claire opened it slowly. Inside rested her silver star necklace, fully repaired, the cracked chain replaced with delicate platinum links strong enough to last a lifetime. Claire looked up at him speechless. Ethan's voice dropped lower now, more personal. "You were never someone waiting to be rescued." The ballroom remained completely silent around them. "You were the person my family owed everything to long before we met." Claire's chest tightened painfully. Because somehow, even after everything he revealed tonight, one fear still remained. She looked at him quietly beneath the lights and cameras and whispered the question haunting her since the hospital. "Do you love me because of who I am?" Her voice trembled softly. "Or because of what my father did for yours?" The ballroom remained silent after Claire's question. Hundreds of people stood frozen beneath the white lights while cameras hovered quietly around them, waiting for Ethan Callaway's answer. But Ethan did not answer immediately. He simply looked at her, really looked at her. The same way he had the night she spilled champagne on his tuxedo and everyone else in the room only saw a mistake. Then finally, Ethan spoke softly enough that the entire ballroom leaned closer to hear him. Your father gave my family shelter for 2 days. His eyes never left hers. You gave me peace after 15 years. Claire felt her breath catch instantly. Ethan stepped closer beneath the glow of the skyline windows. I started looking for Thomas Bennett's daughter because of gratitude. His voice lowered gently. But somewhere between rooftop coffee and late-night floral setups, a faint sad smile touched his mouth. I fell in love with a woman who sees beauty in broken things. Tears burned behind Claire's eyes immediately. Around them, cameras flashed softly, but suddenly none of it mattered anymore. Not the investors. Not the headlines. Not the whispers following them for weeks. Ethan reached toward the repaired silver star necklace resting in her hands. You spent your whole life believing you were standing outside the room. His thumb brushed lightly across the small silver charm. Meanwhile, you were the reason the room existed in the first place. Claire looked down quickly, overwhelmed by the ache building inside her chest. Because for the first time in years, someone was not choosing her out of pity. Not obligation. Not charity. Ethan chose her clearly enough for the entire world to see it. Across the ballroom, Vanessa remained completely still near the front row. The confidence she once wore like armor had disappeared entirely now. She looked tired. Smaller somehow. Human. Claire slowly turned toward her sister. For one long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vanessa lowered her eyes first. It was the first time Claire could ever remember that happening. The following months changed everything quietly instead of all at once. The headlines eventually faded. Social media found newer scandals. Investors moved on to other stories. But Claire's life no longer belonged to survival alone. Ethan helped her secure the floral design scholarship originally intended for her years earlier, though Claire insisted on completing the program herself without special treatment. I need to know I earned something on my own, she told him one evening while studying event sketches spread across her kitchen table. Ethan only smiled softly before setting takeout containers beside her notebooks. That might be the most stubborn thing I have ever heard. Claire smiled for what felt like the first real time in months. You survived billion-dollar negotiations. I survived my sister. Ethan laughed quietly beneath the warm apartment lights. Fair point. Her mother's health slowly improved too. Not perfectly, but enough for laughter to return to the apartment again. Sometimes Claire caught her mother watching Ethan carefully across the dinner table with knowing eyes. Your father would have liked him, she whispered one night while folding laundry together. Claire looked down shyly at the silver star necklace now resting safely against her chest again. Yeah, she answered softly. I think so too. Vanessa remained distant for a while after the gala announcement. Shame has a way of making people disappear from themselves before they disappear from others. But one snowy afternoon in December, Claire found Vanessa standing quietly outside her tiny floral studio, carrying a cardboard box against her chest. The sign above the window now read, Starlight Floral. Claire opened the door slowly. Vanessa? Snowflakes melted against Vanessa's blonde hair, while city traffic hummed softly behind her. She held out the box awkwardly. I found more letters in my storage unit. Claire hesitated before taking it carefully. Inside were old photographs of their father teaching them to plant flowers on a fire escape when they were children. Crayon drawings. Birthday cards. Tiny pieces of a family that existed before fear ruined it. Vanessa swallowed hard. I spent so many years trying to become someone untouchable that I forgot how to be someone good. Claire looked at her quietly. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears she no longer tried hiding. I do not expect forgiveness overnight. Her voice trembled softly. But I am tired of competing with my own sister. For a long moment, Claire simply stood there listening to snow brush softly against the shop windows. Then finally, she stepped aside from the doorway. It is cold out here. Vanessa looked surprised. Claire gave a small tired smile. Come inside. Healing did not happen dramatically after that. No perfect speeches. No instant repair. Just small things. Coffee together sometimes. Quiet conversations. Learning how to exist as sisters instead of rivals. And somehow, that mattered more. 6 months later, Starlight Floral hosted its official grand opening inside a renovated glass studio overlooking the East River. White orchids filled every corner beneath strings of warm lights, while soft jazz drifted through the crowded room. Claire moved through guests laughing quietly with clients and designers she once believed existed too far above her world to ever know her name. Then suddenly the lights dimmed slightly near the center of the studio. Claire turned instinctively. Ethan stood beneath the hanging white roses in a black suit, watching her with that same steady expression that always made the rest of the room disappear. Guests slowly quieted around them. Ethan stepped forward holding a small velvet box in his hand. Claire's heartbeat immediately stumbled. "Ethan," he smiled softly. "You know," he said calmly, "for someone who designs beautiful moments for a living, you still look surprised very easily." Laughter rippled gently through the studio. Claire covered her face briefly, already emotional before he even continued. Ethan stopped directly in front of her beneath the white flowers she designed herself. "The first night we met, you thought you ruined my tuxedo." He opened the velvet box slowly. Inside rested a diamond ring connected delicately to the repaired silver star charm. "Turns out you ruined my ability to imagine a future without you instead." Tears filled Claire's eyes instantly as guests smiled around them beneath the warm lights. Ethan's voice softened now. "Claire Bennett." He looked at her like she was the easiest choice he had ever made. "Will you marry me?" Claire laughed through tears while nodding before words could even form properly. "Yes." Applause filled the studio as Ethan slipped the ring onto her hand beneath the glow of white orchids and city lights. And standing near the back of the room, Vanessa quietly wiped tears from her eyes while watching the sister she once tried to erase become the woman finally chosen in front of the whole world.